The woods have always held a special place in my heart. Growing up, I often ventured into the depths of the forest near my childhood home, where every rustling leaf and chirping bird seemed to speak to me. But it was one particular night, deep in the heart of the forest, that left an indelible mark on my psyche. This is the tale of my harrowing experience in a remote cabin, where I came face to face with the unknown. It was a crisp, autumn evening when my friend Mark and I decided to embark on a weekend getaway to a cabin nestled deep within the woods. The cabin had been in Mark's family for generations, a rustic relic of times past. Its remote location, far from the hustle and bustle of civilization, was precisely what drew us to it. We were seeking solitude and the chance to reconnect with nature. As we approached the cabin, the forest seemed to close in around us. Tall trees cast long shadows, and the fading sunlight filtered through their leaves in a mesmerizing dance of light and darkness. The cabin itself was a quaint, weathered structure with a moss-covered roof, and it felt as if it had been plucked straight from a storybook. Little did I know that this charming hideaway would soon become the backdrop for a night of unimaginable terror. The evening began peacefully enough. We unpacked our bags, lit a fire in the hearth, and settled into the cabin's rustic interior. As the sun dipped below the horizon, darkness descended upon us like a heavy shroud. The solitude was palpable, and the only sounds that reached our ears were the crackling of the fire and the distant hoot of an owl. But as the night wore on, a series of peculiar noises began to emanate from the surrounding forest. At first, we dismissed them as the usual sounds of wildlife going about their nocturnal routines. However, as the noises grew louder and more bizarre, we couldn't help but exchange uneasy glances. The eerie chorus of rustling leaves and snapping twigs seemed to draw nearer to the cabin. It was as though an invisible presence was circling us, taunting us with its presence. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Just when we thought the situation couldn't get any stranger, an unearthly scream pierced the night. It was unlike anything I had ever heard, a bone-chilling wail that sent shivers down my spine. Mark and I exchanged frantic whispers, trying to rationalize the source of the sound. As we cautiously peered out of the cabin's windows, our hearts raced. In the moonlight, we caught glimpses of a dark, shadowy figure darting among the trees. Its movements were erratic, almost inhuman. We couldn't discern any clear features, only the sense of a malevolent presence lurking just beyond our line of sight. Fear gripped us like a vice, and we huddled together, our eyes locked on the darkness outside. We dared not speak, as though making a sound would invite whatever unseen terror lurked in the woods to descend upon us. Time seemed to stretch, and the minutes dragged on like hours. As the night wore on, the inexplicable occurrences continued. Unidentifiable whispers seemed to seep through the cabin's walls, and the temperature inside plummeted. I could see my breath in the air, despite the roaring fire we had stoked earlier. Our rational minds struggled to make sense of the unfolding nightmare. We contemplated leaving the cabin, making a run for it, but the thought of stepping into the inky darkness, where the enigmatic presence waited, was too daunting to bear. We were trapped in our own personal horror story, and there was no escape. In our desperate attempt to find answers, we began to search the cabin for any clues that might shed light on our predicament. Our efforts led us to a hidden compartment beneath the cabin's creaky floorboards. Inside, we discovered a collection of old journals and peculiar artifacts. One journal, in particular, caught our attention. Its pages were filled with cryptic symbols and passages written in a language that defied comprehension. The drawings depicted bizarre creatures and strange rituals, all connected to the forest that surrounded us. It was as though the cabin's previous occupants had been engaged in some dark, otherworldly practices. The realization hit us like a ton of bricks. The cabin was not just a quaint family retreat, it was a portal to something far more sinister. The mysterious figures, the eerie noises, and the bone-chilling screams were all connected to the ancient, malevolent forces that had been awakened by our presence. With newfound determination, we decided that our only chance of survival was to leave the cabin behind. Armed with flashlights and our courage bolstered by the hope of escaping the nightmarish ordeal, we stepped out into the forest. The trees seemed to close in around us, their branches twisting and contorting in grotesque shapes. The moon cast long, sinister shadows that danced at the periphery of our vision. The forest itself felt alive, as though it harbored a malevolent intelligence that sought to keep us within its grasp. Our flight through the woods was a blur of terror. We stumbled and tripped, the unseen presence hot on our heels. The once familiar forest had transformed into a labyrinth of nightmare, where every turn led us deeper into the unknown. Exhausted and disoriented, we eventually found ourselves at the edge of the forest, the first rays of dawn breaking on the horizon. As the sun's light touched the trees, the unnatural phenomena that had haunted us throughout the night gradually faded away. We never looked back as we left the forest behind, the cabin disappearing into the distance. Our encounter with the unexplained had left an indelible mark on us, one that would haunt our dreams for years to come. My experience in the woods that night remains a terrifying and unsettling memory. Encounters with mysterious creatures and unexplained phenomena can both fascinate and strike fear into the hearts of those who experience them. While we may never fully understand the events that transpired in that remote cabin, sharing such experiences with others who may have had similar encounters or with experts in the field can provide solace and possibly shed light on the inexplicable. To this day, I carry the weight of that night with me, a constant reminder that there are forces in this world beyond our comprehension. The woods, once a place of solace and wonder, have been forever tainted by the shadow of the unknown. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when I decided to embark on what was meant to be a relaxing weekend getaway. I had always been drawn to the serenity of the great outdoors, and when my friend Mark suggested that I borrow his family cabin deep in the woods, I jumped at the opportunity. Little did I know that this seemingly idyllic adventure would soon turn into a harrowing tale of survival. The cabin was nestled in the heart of a dense forest, far away from the hustle and bustle of the city. Surrounded by towering pine trees, it exuded an aura of isolation and tranquility that appealed to my craving for solitude. My plan was simple: disconnect from the digital world, unwind by the fireplace with a good book, and rejuvenate my spirit. The drive to the cabin was a winding journey through narrow roads flanked by thickets of trees on either side. As I ventured deeper into the wilderness, the canopy of foliage overhead grew denser, casting eerie shadows on the path ahead. The isolation was palpable, but rather than being unsettling, it was strangely comforting. I was eager to leave behind the noise and chaos of everyday life. Upon arriving at the cabin, I was immediately struck by its rustic charm. The wooden structure exuded an inviting warmth that made me feel right at home. The windows framed picturesque views of the forest, and the fireplace crackled with a welcoming fire. It was the perfect setting for a peaceful retreat. The first day at the cabin passed without incident. I spent my time exploring the surroundings, taking long walks through the forest, and reveling in the symphony of nature. It was as though the trees whispered secrets of the woods, and the babbling brook nearby provided a soothing soundtrack to my solitude. I was truly in my element. However, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the forest plunged into darkness, a sense of unease began to creep over me. The isolation that had been so comforting during the day now felt oppressive. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone in the woods, that unseen eyes were watching me from the shadows. I attributed it to an overactive imagination and decided to retire to the cabin for the night. Inside, I barricaded myself in with a sturdy lock on the door, as if that would protect me from the unknown. I sat by the fireplace, its flickering flames casting dancing shadows on the walls, and tried to lose myself in a novel. But the sense of unease lingered, and every creak and rustle outside seemed amplified in the silence of the cabin. As I lay in bed that night, sleep proved elusive. I tossed and turned, my mind racing with irrational thoughts. It was during one of those fitful moments that I thought I heard something, a faint, distant sound that sent a shiver down my spine. I strained my ears, listening intently, and that's when I heard it again, a low, guttural growl coming from outside. My heart raced as I tried to convince myself it was just an animal, perhaps a bear or a coyote. But the sound was unlike anything I had ever heard before. It was primal, menacing, and it seemed to be getting closer. Panic set in, and I knew I had to take action. With trembling hands, I reached for the flashlight on the nightstand and cautiously made my way to the window. I peered outside, and my blood ran cold. In the pale glow of the flashlight, I saw a pair of glowing eyes staring back at me from the darkness. They were not the eyes of a wild animal, they were the eyes of something far more sinister. My heart pounding, I backed away from the window, my mind racing. I needed to call for help, but there was no cell signal this deep in the woods. My only option was to use the landline in the cabin. I rushed to the phone, dialed 911, and waited anxiously for a response. The voice on the other end was calm and reassuring, but I could hardly think straight as I described my situation. The operator assured me that help was on the way and advised me to stay inside and keep the doors locked. It was a small comfort, but it was something. Minutes felt like hours as I sat in the cabin, my ears straining to catch any sound from outside. The growls had ceased, but the sense of impending danger still hung in the air. I had no way of knowing who or what was lurking in the darkness, and fear gnawed at my insides. Finally, the distant wail of sirens pierced the silence, and a wave of relief washed over me. The cavalry had arrived. I rushed to the window to signal them, and as the headlights of the rescue vehicles illuminated the forest, I saw the outline of a massive creature darting back into the trees. The rescue team was quick to secure the area, and they found no trace of the intruder. They assured me that I was safe now and that they would patrol the vicinity throughout the night. I thanked them profusely and tried to express my gratitude, but words couldn't convey the depth of my relief. As dawn broke, the investigators pieced together the events of the night. They found claw marks on the cabin door and strange footprints in the mud outside, unlike any animal tracks they had ever seen. It was a mystery that left them perplexed, and they couldn't provide a satisfactory explanation for the creature that had stalked me in the night. With the assurance of safety, I decided to stay one more night at the cabin, determined not to let fear dictate my actions. The investigators promised to maintain a presence in the area, and the daylight hours were peaceful once more. I convinced myself that whatever had come for me had been scared away by the arrival of the rescue team. That night, I kept the cabin well lit, with every window covered by thick curtains. I had a baseball bat by my side and my phone within easy reach. Despite my best efforts to stay vigilant, sleep eventually overcame me, and I drifted into uneasy dreams. It was the sound of shattering glass that jolted me awake. My heart leaped into my throat as I sat up in bed, the room plunged into darkness. The power had gone out, leaving me in a state of utter vulnerability. I fumbled for my flashlight and shone it towards the source of the noise. Standing in the broken window was the same menacing figure I had seen the previous night, its eyes gleaming with an otherworldly malevolence. This time, there was no time to call for help. With a guttural growl, it lunged at me. Instinct kicked in, and I swung the baseball bat with all my might. It connected with a sickening thud, and the intruder let out a blood-curdling shriek before collapsing to the floor. My heart raced as I frantically searched for my phone, my trembling fingers dialing 911 once more. The police arrived quickly, and this time, they found the creature still twitching on the cabin floor. It was a grotesque sight, its features twisted and deformed. It bore no resemblance to any known animal, and its origins remained a mystery. The investigators could only speculate that it was some kind of mutant or genetic aberration. The nightmare was finally over, but the events of that night would haunt me for the rest of my life. The cabin, once a sanctuary of solitude, had become a place of terror and dread. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had intruded upon something ancient and malevolent, something that lurked in the darkest corners of the wilderness. In the days that followed, I returned to the city, shaken and scarred by my ordeal. The authorities took the creature's body for further analysis, but the results were inconclusive. There were no answers, no explanations that could bring closure to the nightmare I had experienced. I struggled with insomnia, haunted by the memory of those glowing eyes and the inhuman growls that had filled the night. I couldn't escape the feeling that the creature I had encountered was just one of many, that the wilderness held secrets beyond our comprehension. The experience had changed me. I no longer sought solace in the embrace of the forest. Instead, I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, afraid of what might be lurking in the shadows. The tranquility I had once cherished was replaced by a pervasive sense of unease. I often wondered if I had ventured too far into the wilderness, if there were places in this world that were meant to remain untouched by human presence. Perhaps some things were never meant to be discovered, and the price of curiosity could be a descent into madness. Lost in the wilderness, both physically and mentally, I had survived a harrowing encounter with the unknown. But the scars it left behind were a constant reminder that there are forces in this world that defy explanation, that challenge our understanding of reality. And as I gazed out at the city skyline, I couldn't help but wonder what other secrets the wilderness held, hidden in the depths of the forest, waiting to be uncovered by those who dared to venture into the unknown. I had always been drawn to the allure of the great outdoors. The dense woods, the whispering leaves, the solitude, it was my sanctuary, my escape from the hustle and bustle of everyday life. But little did I know that one fateful summer hike would lead me to an experience that still sends shivers down my spine. It was a warm and sunny morning when I decided to explore a remote trail deep within the heart of the forest. The dense canopy overhead created a natural tunnel, with dappled sunlight streaming through the leaves. The silence was palpable, broken only by the gentle rustling of leaves and the occasional chirping of birds. It was the kind of tranquility that lured me in, like a siren's song. As I ventured deeper into the woods, I came across an old, weather-beaten signpost that pointed toward a trail marked, Whispering Pines. It was a trail I had never heard of before, and my curiosity got the best of me. With each step, the atmosphere grew thicker, and the air grew cooler. The woods seemed to close in around me, making me feel as though I were the only soul in this forgotten corner of the world. Hours passed, and the sun began its descent toward the horizon. That's when I saw it, nestled among the trees like a relic from a bygone era, an abandoned cabin. It was a dilapidated structure, its windows shattered, and its wooden walls bearing the scars of time and neglect. A chill ran down my spine as I approached, but my sense of adventure urged me to explore further. I pushed open the creaking door, revealing a musty interior shrouded in darkness. Dust particles danced in the beams of sunlight that pierced through the broken windows. The air was heavy with the scent of decay, and I couldn't help but feel like an intruder in this forgotten place. My footsteps echoed through the cabin as I cautiously made my way deeper inside. It was then that I noticed a trapdoor in the corner of the room. The wood beneath my feet groaned in protest as I lifted it, revealing a dark and narrow tunnel leading into the earth. My heart raced as I contemplated whether to descend into the unknown, but my curiosity got the better of me once more. The tunnel was long and winding, and I had to rely on my flashlight to pierce the oppressive darkness. The air grew colder with each step, and a sense of unease settled over me like a heavy shroud. But I pressed on, unable to resist the mystery that lay ahead. As the tunnel finally opened into a small chamber, I gasped in horror. There, in the dim light of my flashlight, I saw a figure huddled in the corner. Its eyes glowed with an eerie, unnatural light, casting eerie shadows across the walls. My heart pounded in my chest as I struggled to make sense of what I was seeing. The figure turned slowly to face me, and a guttural growl emanated from its throat. Fear surged through me, and I stumbled backward, scrambling to escape the chamber and the nightmare within. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever, and I ran as though my life depended on it. I emerged from that wretched place, gasping for breath and covered in sweat. I never looked back, and I never returned to those woods again. To this day, I can't explain what I encountered in that abandoned cabin, but I know one thing for certain: some mysteries are best left unsolved, and some places are best left untouched by the curious souls who wander into the unknown.